few years ago, a friend of mine, we talked together while we were out running, and he talked to me about some adventures he was having while running in the European Alps, running a multiple day stage race through the mountains, a run that I found out was called the Transalpine Run. Back a few years ago, this captured my interest. European culture and camaraderie with a single focus, nothing else to do for a week but run through mountain scenery, through Germany, through Austria, and through Italy as a team of two. All I had to do was train to go for 300 kilometers and 10,000 meters of vert over a 7-day period. So in 2014, I did the training and off we went. And this really flipped me into a love affair with trail running for the first time. And our guest today seems to have developed a similar love for the unpaved places to run. And we're going to listen to hear what he has to say. This is Bill Graham, and his book is Running on Tired Legs. Hi, and welcome to Running Book Reviews Podcast, where we review running books to help you decide if you'd like to read the book for yourself. We also hope listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running and maybe inspire you to do something different or try a little of something new. My name's Alan, and with my co-host Liz, we're going to talk with author Bill Graham about his new book, Running on Tired Legs.
So first, a little bit about the book. Running on Tired Legs is a memoir of Bill Graham's life and a parallel account of the Lakeland 100-kilometer run in the English Lake District. Bill's personal journey starts with a description of his childhood, introduction to sport and later running, and a reflection of what he was like as a kid. He was extremely shy and had some issues with performance anxiety during competitions, which he talks about in the book. Through sports and especially running, he builds on his confidence throughout his life, and he makes many friends along the way. During the 100-kilometer run, there are several times when Bill is not sure if he will finish, and he describes the variety of challenges he had along the way. A little bit about Bill. He's a runner for over 4 decades and a multiple-time sub-3-hour marathoner, which we're particularly interested in.
Goddamn, we're so jealous.
That too. As a youth, he ran in the UK cross-country national championships, and he's now a running coach and a mentor. He has lived in South Africa, where he also ran with running teams, and the UK, where he also ran with several teams. And we're pleased to welcome Bill Graham. Welcome to the podcast, Bill.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So I guess we'll start with the first question. So how did you decide to write the book, and who are you hoping to help?
I started when actually a running colleague was going through the process of writing his book. And he was a guy who I'd actually coached, and he is mentioned in the book, a guy called Ira Rainey. And he was struggling with his marathon. So he came to me and asked for some advice. And I gave him a plan, and he went away and he achieved. And that is detailed in the book. But he also came to me because he wanted to do ultras. And he came to me and asked me about the world of ultras. And he said, I'm going to do this ultra as a memoir to his work colleague who had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he felt he needed to do something extraordinary to try and raise money. So he said, I want to do this ultra, which was a fairly local affair. It was around Bristol, 45 miles of mainly off-road trails around the city of Bristol. And I'd done it the year before. So he came to me and he spoke to me and he said, I want to put you in the book. So can you give me just a page and a half, a brief history of your running? So I said, yeah, I can do that. I can do that for you. So I sat down. And when I started to write, I thought a page and a half isn't enough. I've got so much to say about where I've come from and how I've got to where I am. But I did the right thing, and I did a couple of pages for him, and it featured in the book in one of the chapters. And it first came to my mind that maybe I should do something, because I did have so much to say, and I had running diaries going back to 1981, handwritten diaries that I used to keep. And I've still got those diaries today. You know, it's just, it was a big part of my life for many years. And I'd made so many mistakes, as we all do when we start. I'd made every mistake you could think of. And I just thought, well, maybe if I write it down, maybe other people coming into the sport, it may, if they read this story, it may prevent them from making those same mistakes. So that's how it all started.
I have to say, I'm always impressed with people that have like diaries from, when they first started running or for like a long period of time like that, because our coach, Bill, he's also told me, and one time he brought me like a whole stack to the workout. He had a whole stack of these little Runner's World, just these like every 2 pages had a whole week on it. And he had like all like from, I think the same thing, like 1980. And I was like, wow, I've been running since, like 1994. And I don't think I have a single diary. Like I know for a while I tracked things on a spreadsheet because my coach was, had us completing spreadsheets. But yeah, I have to say that I haven't really tracked anything. And I kind of wish I had, because sometimes I wonder, why a certain race went so well and I can't go back to anything. So I'm always kind of very interested in people that have managed to keep diaries for so long.
Well, my initial diaries were very, very simple. It basically said, and it was no bigger than a 2-inch square little diary I'd been given in work. And I just used to write in there the day I'd run, how far I thought I'd run and how long it had taken me. Now, the calculation of how far I'd run was based on my assumption of how fast I could run. So if I had been out for an hour, I say, well, I'm going to do an 8-minute mile in. So therefore I've run so many miles. That was my calculation. This was before we had all the technology to tell us how far we'd run. It was a calculation. That's all it said. But then as I got into the running, it progressed more into how far, how fast, how I felt, what was the weather like, and in my particular case, how my asthma was, whether I had breathing difficulties. So it became more detailed. And when I started to write the book, if I wanted to think about a particular race, I would just go to the diary, read my notes, and those few lines would just bring it all back. It was almost as though you're stepping back in time and going, actually, yes, I remember that race. I remember this. Because I always put, if I'd had a good run, if I'd had a bad run, and how I felt. And that's how it started. So they became more and more detailed.
With the longer runs, you mentioned your friend Ira, who appears in your book, and the fact that you ran an ultra based specifically on a focus to raise funds for something or to recognize something. And often we do see that people develop a very strong why in terms of reason for running. People explain to us, this is so you don't drop out when things get tough. You can pull this why out of your box and say, like, I'm doing it for this reason. And it keeps you sort of strong. Why did you decide to run 100K through the lakes and sort of make that a focus of the book? Because that's like a key part of the book. It's sort of a skeleton throughout the book.
Yeah, well, that came to me when I sat down and initially I just wrote a lot, and it was like a running diary. I just wrote stuff down as much as I could, and I dumped it onto a piece of paper, which was about 40 pages, and I asked Ira to read it. And he said, there's a lot of stuff in there. He said, now you need to create a story. And he said, you're not just writing about running, you're writing about yourself. You've had an interesting life. Make sure people, he said, you want people to relate to you and to relate to your story. So you've got to put a little bit of personal things in there. But this particular event, because it was 3 days after my 60th birthday, it was the longest distance I'd ever run. So it was about looking back at that and thinking, well, what actually made me do that? Why did I attempt to run further than I'd ever run 3 days after my 60th birthday? And it was just because I had this thing in me at the time that was like, if it's something interesting and it's something I think I might be able to tackle, then I've got to try it. I had this mentality of, because I'd moved on from just being a road runner, I'd moved to mountains and off-road, and this was in an area that I loved. And I knew the whole of the Lake District. I'd walked there, I'd run there. And it was just the thought of spending a whole day again running in an area I loved. And it just attracted me. It just had to be. And then when it came to the book, I thought, what better event to base the book on than the one that I thought was the biggest challenge I'd done.
It's clear that in the book that it's very clear that you have a love for the Lake District. Most of our audience is in North America, and they may not actually know anything about the English Lake District. I was born in the UK, and when I run with the guys in Canada here, I talk to them about the Lake District and see them glazing over. I know exactly what you mean when you talk about your love affair with the English Lake District. But maybe for our listeners, you weren't born there. You were born in the country, but you weren't born in that area. What is the Lake District, and why is it so central to your love of running?
Well, I suppose, I didn't even go to Lake District myself till I was in my 20s. And that was just a visit. I was passing through with a friend, and we spent a couple of days in the Lake District. And even then, I thought it was a lovely place, but we moved on. We were traveling around the whole of the country. But later in life, when I was injured through running, I had a passion for walking, and we used to walk locally. But the Lake District is an area that hasn't got massive mountains. It's not over a massive area. You know, there are more mountainous regions in the world that are more spectacular. But there's something about the Lake District, about its beauty, because wherever you are, you can get to the other side of it, and you can run it around it, you can run through it, you can run across it, and it's all accessible. There's no areas that you could say, well, you can't really go there because you'd have to be a climber, a proper mountain climber, and you need all that skill and all that. You can go to nearly every area of the Lake District. And it just has that quintessential green valleys and the countryside views that you get in the UK. It's just one of those areas.
So I guess I want to ask my follow-up question, because I have a hard time wrapping my head around running 100 kilometers. So I was kind of wondering, now that you've done it once, would you ever do another 100-kilometer race?
I think mentally I could do it. I'm not so sure physically, with the injuries and the illnesses like that I might be able to do it. But as we begin to come out of lockdown in this country, people are running more, and already I'm toying with the idea of possibly doing another one similar. And because, again, I love the area so much, it would have to be in the Lake District, because there are several races that go across and around and through the Lake District. So the thought is definitely there, but as Alan said, as you get a little bit older, it gets a little bit tougher, and the physical side is the thing that will prevent me. You know, will my knees take the strain? And I will only find that out once I start to extend the running I'm doing currently into longer distances off-road locally. And I've got plenty of areas I can go out for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours and spend that time running. So wow. Yes, I would love to do another one. Physically, will I be able to? I'm not sure, but I can tell you this, I will be trying.
That's incredible.
Fantastic. Something that's on my own personal bucket list is maybe to try to do, not in one 24-hour period, because it's probably too tough, but to try and cover the distance, the circuit of the Bob Graham round, which is the famous circuit. You will know that for sure.
Yeah.
Mentally, it looks far, far beyond my ability to do it within the allotted time. I think you have to do it in 24 hours, is it?
Yes.
But I'd like to cover the circuit and just see the sights, maybe take 2 or 3 days to get around.
Yeah, I've done sections of it to test my ability to meet the time, and it would be very, very close. I'm not sure. I think the record is held by somebody who's about 68 or 69 years old to have done it within 24 hours. I'm not sure I've got that in my locker. I don't know, but I have tried a few of the legs, and I have done them within the time I would need to do it on the day, but you've got to then put them all together. And as you say, do it in 24 hours.
you got 2 years to train, and then you'll be the oldest guy to complete the Bob Graham round.
That would be a fantastic achievement. I mean, I did what they call the old man's Bob Graham, which is the Josh Naylor challenge.
Yes.
And I completed that, and that was another fantastic achievement because I did that on my own, and it wasn't recognized because I didn't register for it, because I just decided I'm going to do it. We were in the Lake District, we were on holiday, the weather forecast was good, which doesn't always happen in the Lake District. You've been to the Lake District, you will know that the weather can be awful sometimes. And the weather was right, I felt good, and I went and did it. And it was just a fantastic event. And I did it on my own with a bit of support from Claire. She was there at the 2 road stops you get, and there's only 2 where you drop back down to the road. But it was something like that. So the Lake District has these events, and the Bob Graham for me is the ultimate one to do. I'd love to be able to do it, but until we can get back out there and running it again, I don't know whether I've physically got the power to do it.
So I guess I'll start with the personal stuff. You kind of start the book describing yourself as a very shy kid. And it seems like, as the book progresses and, you get older, you're sort of less limited by that personality trait as you become an adult. Personally, I can kind of relate to that because I was a shy kid. I mean, the teacher would say my name in class and I would want to hide under the desk. So I completely related to that aspect. So I guess the question is, do you think that it was running or sport in general, because you also played soccer? Do you think that that's what helped change you and morph you into like a more confident adult?
Yeah, I think it played a massive part. Sport was always a big part of my life. And unfortunately, the school I went to, they were sports mad. They just wanted everybody to take part in all the sports that you possibly could. And because I was quite capable of sport, I found that after the first few months, once you get into those sports in a new school, people started to talk to you who you didn't particularly know, who weren't in your class. They would talk to you and say, "Oh, I saw you in the football match and the soccer match, and you played really well." And they'd say about, "Oh, you did well in the cross country," and it helped me relate to people more, and it certainly helped my development. My stammer gradually disappeared in those early days of secondary school when I was around 12, 13 years old, and it slowly started to disappear. And as I got more and more confident, and without a doubt, that ability to grab people's attention through my sport just made me feel better, because I was always one of those, as a soccer player, Alan, you will know that some managers like to shout on balls, some managers like to I was a player who needed somebody to put their arm around me. Yeah, I just needed that. If you shouted at me, I would disappear into my shell and I wouldn't come out again. And I would be terrible for the rest of the match. So that arm around you was, and the teacher I mentioned in the book, Jeff Reynolds, who was our soccer and sports teacher, I actually sent him a copy of the book and signed it for him. And he's 85 years old now. And he sent me a beautiful letter back saying, "It's so gratifying to know that, all the work I've done in school, and now I've got recognition." He said, "I've got an MBE, but now I've got a recognition from a pupil." And he's written a very nice thing about me in the book, because he was a tough guy, but he always demanded the best from you. And, I felt if I didn't do my best, I'd let him down. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted him to see me as a part of his running team and his soccer team. So it definitely helped me.
Fantastic reason just for writing the book just on its own, just to get that response. I'm getting goosebumps just imagining how you felt getting a response like that from someone. So well done. Okay, so you're into marathons, and like we are now, you eventually got into a little bit of an ambition, a burning ambition, to try to run a 3-hour marathon. How did you get to that point? How did you overcome that?
The marathon for me was, I did a couple of runs, because I had problems with my knees. The doctor advised me to run in between playing soccer, said it would ease your knees, and it did. And then I got into it a bit, and I got chatting to a guy I worked with, and I said, you know what, I'd love to do one of those long distance things they do. What's it called? A marathon. And he said, yeah. 26 miles or something. I said, yeah, that'd be great. Do you fancy it? And he said, yeah, let's go and do it. So we did a little bit of training and we went along, and boy, did we suffer afterwards. We suffered terribly. And my brother rang me that night and said, how did it go? How did the marathon go? And I said, it's the most painful thing I've ever done in my life. I said, I ache from head to toe. There isn't a part of my body. I think even my fingernails are aching. That's how bad I feel. And he said,
I remember that.
do you fancy doing another one? I said, yeah, I'd love to. And that's difficult to explain to people, why you've just put yourself through so much pain and your initial reaction is, yes, I want to do another one.
Well, maybe the initial reaction was, no, I never want to do this again. But it's because he called you a few hours later. So then it was different.
Possibly. If he'd have asked me as I crossed the finish line, maybe he'd have got a different answer. But it was just one of those. And I went on this journey then of really making some terrible decisions with regards to my training and preparation. And, all this is written about in the book. And I did some really daft things, but, we didn't have the internet to log into to get all this advice about training. The only people I knew who ran were other people who played football or soccer with me. So I didn't really get any proper advice. So I was just bumbling my way through. And it took me a long time. And it does grip you. You must know it yourselves now that once you get into that mindset of a target, it's just relentless. You just keep driving yourself. And I don't know what it is in me that drove me to do, because there were a couple of times that I felt, oh, that's it, I've had enough of this and I'm going to walk away from it, where I'd had particularly bad runs. But it just escalated, and I joined the club. I met somebody in South Africa who I used to play soccer with, and he said, come along to our club. And suddenly I was running with the club. And for me, joining a running club is the best thing you can do. There are so many people who've got so much good advice, and all they talk about is running. So you're in an environment where people just want to talk about running. And that's what we want to do, isn't it? Talk about running.
So was the first sub 3 hour, I guess that was after you joined the running club. You had been running.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I joined the running club in South Africa. My times started to improve. I was getting structured training. We were doing longer runs on the weekend. We were doing quality sessions during the week. I was running with better runners. They actually told me off if I used to run too quick on the long runs, and they would say, hold back. Don't leave your best runs on the training. You keep that for the marathon. They said, just ease back a bit. You don't need to run that quick today. Quality work, do your quality. When you're not doing quality work, you're just running. And that's the key to it. Make sure your body recovers enough so that when you come to do your quality, you can give it your absolute best. And running with these guys was just an inspiration. They'd all run Comrades Marathon in South Africa. They'd all done that, and that was something else that inspired me. But it was just the way they run, and the story is in the book about when I came very, very close to getting the 3 hours, but was bitterly disappointed. And I think I had got advice from the wrong person in the running club, because not all runners are smart runners. Some runners are good without really understanding why they're good, but other runners know how to get the best out of themselves. And that's what I've always tried to do and tried to instill in people through coaching, is that don't look at somebody else and say, I want to be like him. Look at yourself and think, how much can I improve and what do I need to do to get those improvements?
So maybe you can share the the mistake, I guess, that you made in the marathon that was just short? Because I think this was the one where the first half was too quick.
Far too quick. You got to remember, at that time, my personal best for half marathon was 1:24 and a half or something like this. So we went off. This guy said, "Leave your watch, I'll pace it." And we set off, and this is in South Africa. They start at 6 a.m. races over there because of the heat. So they get them out of the way early in the morning. So we set off, and it was just a straight out and back course. So there's nothing complicated about it. It was a fairly flat course. It was, it was a good place to do that sub-3. And we'd gone through halfway, we were coming back. There was a big group of us all running together, and gradually people started to drop off, and I started to feel the pace. And my running colleague, my guy I used to train with, John McGowan, he was struggling and he dropped off. And then there was just me and this guy, this Dudley, and he just went. He looked at his watch and he was gone. And he finished the race, and I finished in, I think it was 3:02, 3:03. And I've never felt so ill. I felt ill. I think I must have had a touch of sunstroke as well. When I spoke to him, he said to me, "I don't understand why we failed. We went through halfway in 1:26 or 1:25. And I said, "That's close to my PB. I can't maintain that for 2. Why did you do it?" "Oh no," he said, "and I left you because I've not done over 3 hours for a marathon for many years, and I didn't intend to do one today," which I thought was incredibly selfish of him. I know that's a thing for his, but don't say to people, "I will guide you through," and then dump them when they're not meeting your expectations.
Yeah.
So that was a real hard lesson for me. It was a tough lesson. And I realized then that not everybody who's quick is actually a good coach or a good, intelligent runner. And so I learned a bit from that, and it taught me an awful lot about pace judgment and understanding. These days we have so much technology that tells you what your heart rate is, what your VO2 max is, what pace you're running currently while you're out running. You have all these things. But when I used to do track sessions, one of the first things I used to do with new people, I used to say to them, "Right, we're going to the track, we're going to do a track session, but what I want you to do first of all, give me your watches, take all the watches off. I know what you're all capable of." I used to set them a time for a mile. And I'd say, "Right, I want you to run a mile in this time," knowing it's well within their capabilities, and set them off. And I would gauge them all to see who got closest to that time. So in other words, who was the one who go blast it and not understand how fast he was going. I said, the first thing you need to do when you run a marathon, you need to understand what your pace is, what you're doing, how fast you're going. These days it's not as important because you get a mile, you get clocks on every mile and all the rest of it. You've all got watches. But that particular event taught me a big, big lesson.
You can't bank time in the marathon.
No, well, I actually had a guy who used to say to me, he said, "I need to be 5 minutes ahead of my time at halfway because I know I'm going to die at the end." And I said, "But that's why you die at the end, because you're 5 minutes quicker than you need to be."
Yeah.
That's exactly why you die. Up until he stopped running, this guy never changed the way he ran a marathon. Over 5 kilometers, he was a minute and a half quicker than me. Over a marathon, he didn't get within 20 minutes of my personal best because he didn't know how to run a marathon.
Yeah, we used to actually just treat that as a joke in our club. We used to go, "Okay, now remember, go off the marathon as fast as you can, bank as many minutes as you can because you're going." But it was a complete joke. It was an absolute jest.
But some people do it. Some people still do it. And he could never understand why he could never master a marathon, but he used to run it the same way every time.
So when you were in South Africa, you said all the members of your club did the comrades. So you ended up running the comrades yourself. We know from previous podcasts where we spoke to people who've done comrades that it says comrades marathon, but it's actually more than 2 marathons distance for the uninitiated. So how did you find that? What sort of experience was it?
Well, the experience of that was that at the time I was running well. Things were going well. My training was going well, and it was the equivalent to the London Marathon in the UK. it was the biggest event on the running calendar. So, you just had to do it. Even when I did it in 1984, was it, that there was 12,000 people who were prepared to run, as you said, 2+ marathons, 2 and a bit marathons. And there was an up run and there was a down run. And the year I did it was the down run. So people go, oh, you did the easy one. And I said, it doesn't matter whether it's up or down, it's still 2 and a bit marathons, and that's the thing. And actually the down run was, everybody who spoke to me said, you will probably be able to run it quicker, but you will suffer more, because my quads, by the time we got over halfway, I couldn't run down hills. I just couldn't. My quads were screaming. Because even in the down run, there are some big hills to climb as well. Because it's not a flat, it's not just a purely downhill run. As I've said in the book, one of my heroes was Bruce Fordyce. And if you read his book about comrades, and if you listen to him talk about it, he said the same thing. He always used to suffer more once he'd done the down run, even though he was quicker on the down run. But that was an experience, and I still think I approached it like a normal road race. Because I said to my partner and my mate, I said, well, we'll go through halfway in 3:45. That will get us 7.5 hours. And therefore we'll get a silver medal. Job done, not a problem. But once you've run a marathon, if somebody says to you, now go and do it again in that time, that's a big ask. So again, it was another eye-opener. It was a glimpse into the world of ultras, which I sort of put to one side for quite a while before I went back to it. But it was a real eye-opener for me in terms of what's required once you step beyond that 26.2 miles. And it's a different mindset. It's a different ball game altogether.
So you were in South Africa during the height of the embargoes and the apartheid closure, economic closures and things like that. How did you find that, being a young guy in apartheid South Africa?
Well, as I said in the book, when I got there, I was 14 years old. I didn't know anything about apartheid. I didn't know what it was, really. It was something that went on the other side of the world, but you didn't really understand it because, as a 13, 14-year-old, you don't listen to the news bulletins in the evening. You wanted to watch the sport on the TV. That's all you wanted to do. So it wasn't until years later that I really understood what was going on. But the real thing that hits you is when you got there, you get to a bus stop, it says whites only, and you could only get a bus from that bus stop. You couldn't go to a black bus stop and stand there. And they went to different schools. It wasn't until I did running that I competed against native Africans. In soccer at school, it was whites only team. The school was whites only. So it did seem a bit strange. And when I went into the work environment, I was in a factory. I was an apprentice aircraft sheet metal worker. They were only allowed to sweep the floor and clean up after you, or work in the canteen and do menial jobs. They weren't allowed to do skilled labor. So all these sort of things, sort of, as you mature yourself, you just start to question what the society you're living in. And it's a very strange feeling to think, but my parents brought me here and they're happy here because it's given them a better lifestyle. It's given them a richer lifestyle, mm-hmm. But at what expense? It's almost like it's at somebody else's expense. And it is a very difficult thing to come to terms with. And the people who were brought up there, obviously the not so much the Afrikaners, but what they call the South Africans. So they're people whose parents moved out there and then they were born in South Africa. They know no different. They've not seen anything else. And it is, as you get older, it just seems to, it's not, it's not right, and it can't last. And that's when I came back to the UK. But my parents stayed there until they passed away. And
kind of an amazing piece of history now. You and I build it through it, but the people nowadays talking about, equal rights and anti-racism, they didn't know racism like they had as Trevor Noah says, the comedian, we had really good quality, high quality racism we laugh, but it's good to put a footnote on it.
Yeah, it was so prevalent in South Africa, and it was also prevalent in a lot of other countries. But South Africa named it. That's the really shocking thing, is they gave it a name as though they were proud of it.
Yeah, and it must have made you feel kind of powerless. It's sort of like seeing somebody being, bullied in the schoolyard, and not being able to do anything about it because you're afraid of being punched yourself, so because you were young, so you saw that it was something that was, wrong, or it didn't seem fair, but at the same time, like, I guess you felt like there was nothing you could do about it.
And that's very okay. Well, it got to one point where I had if you like, a discussion with an Afrikaans chap at school, and he was a big lad, and I just said, I just think it's wrong what this system you have as government has said is wrong. And he threatened to, as he said, I'll punch your lights out if you say that to me again. And I said, look, you're a bigger lad than me, and no doubt you would be able to punch my lights out, but it won't change my opinion. So go ahead. And he just, luckily for me, he just walked away.
You.
Yeah. Great relief on my part.
Yeah.
Putting South Africa behind you somewhat, and coming back to the UK, you ran a lot of London marathons.
Yeah.
It seemed from the book, you seem to develop a special love affair with the London Marathon.
Well, London Marathon, when I first started running, you couldn't get an entry. It was almost impossible. They had all...
That's still the case.
Yeah, it is very difficult now. But then what I can remember queuing at the main post office in Bristol, okay? And I'm there at about 11 o'clock in the evening, along with lots of other people who were queuing, because you had to do a postal entry, and it had to be dated from a certain date. So everybody queued for a couple of hours before midnight on that date. And as soon as the time passed, midnight went, you posted your letter. That way it would get stamped on the correct date. And they said that particular year, I think the places were filled by the date time of 1.5 minutes past midnight on each of the entries. So what chance did you have of ever getting into this event? And as it says in the book, that my first one was purely by chance through the running club. Well, it was a gymnasium in Bristol, and it was in an old church. And I knew a couple of guys who I used to go to the gymnasium myself, but a couple of guys used to run. So I used to run with them. And then I found they were an affiliated club, and they got free entry. And they'd all shared it around themselves the last few years. None of them wanted to do it, so they gave it to me. And I said, I'll go and give it a go. But for me, I thought, it's just a big show-off event. But I did fall in love with it, because the people, the support is just unreal. It's just so uplifting. When you're struggling, you just wave your arms up in the air, say, come on, help me, I'm struggling. And they cheer and they shout. I even started to write my name, and I put it on a little tag on each arm. So as you went past, people would say, go on, Bill, go ahead, Bill. And you feel as though everybody's cheering for you. And I recommended it to anybody else who did London. Whatever you do, wear a name tag, because everybody will call your name out. And from my first event there, I just fell in love with it. It seems to me, once you get in, it got a little bit easier for some reason. I don't know why, whether it's because you'd run one, but then I was targeting the qualifying time for an England athletics place. So it's like a championship place. And the time for that in those years was 2 hours, 40 minutes. Now I was quite away from that, and it took me a long time to get to that sub 240. So I would qualify automatically, and I would be just behind the professionals on the start line instead of being in one of those packs that are 300 yards back. And the year I got that time, I got to 39 or something. They changed it to 245.
Oh, no.
So for the last, I'd already got under 245 on 3 or 4 occasions. And the year I got my under 240, they said, next year we're going to change it to 245.
I guess it could have been worse. They could have changed it to 235.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been a tough one.
I guess listening to you, it sounds very much like Boston or New York.
Yeah.
Over here. I've run Boston a few times, and similar stuff. If you put your name on your arm or something, people will cheer you, and there are crowds all the way along.
And there's nothing better when you're struggling in a race for have, a few hundred people just shout your name as you go past. It's just a lift. And I said to people, if you're only ever going to do one marathon, do London. Get that crowd behind you, get that atmosphere. The whole week, the whole build up to the race, the whole week on the television, and going up there on the Friday or on the Saturday, going to the expo and the whole atmosphere. But the other big mistake people did make in the early days was people they'll travel up, say on a coach or on a car on the Saturday morning, the race is on the Sunday, and then they go to the expo, get their number, and then they would go and walk around London for 4 hours, 5 hours, sightsee. I used to go to a soccer match and get a seat and sit down. I said, well, why do you're going to run a marathon tomorrow? Why do you want to walk for 4 hours the day before? Go back to your hotel, put your feet up and relax.
Yeah, I did New York Marathon one time, and that's exactly what I did. I spent the day before walking around and around New York because I'd never been there, and all starry-eyed. And of course, then you have it in your legs the next day when you try to run the marathon.
Yeah, I think it's a mistake a lot of people make because you do marathons in places that you wouldn't normally visit. So, the temptation is to go out and sightsee. The only time I go out the door on my feet is to get something to eat in the evening. And I did get into the habit in the last few marathons I did, was going out in the afternoon before the marathon and just doing 10 minutes, just stride out for 10 minutes. Because you've rested a lot in your 3-week taper. I don't know how long a taper you do. I used to do 3 weeks. I found that little stretch your legs just for 10 minutes the day before, just reminding your legs what's coming the next day.
Yeah, I feel the same. I feel like I need that little bit of running the day before because otherwise I feel like I feel a bit stale on the morning of the race. Yeah, I always preferred not to have off the day before. But it seems like you sort of went from wanting sub 3, and then once you got sub 3, it was like you went way sub 3 and pretty quickly and multiple times.
Yeah, it's a barrier, isn't it? It's a barrier. It's just a number, Yeah, and you get fixated on it, and you get anxious when you're close to it. So you get that anxiety of, oh, am I going to do it? Am I going to fail? And once you've failed a few times, it almost becomes like, I'm going to fail, rather than thinking you're going to succeed. So when you do it, I found that it just released it. It just went, that's gone now. That's behind me. I'm only going to look ahead. And as I said, I went out not that many weeks later and did another one just to prove that it wasn't a fluke. And I didn't do another marathon over 3 hours until, I can't remember. It was after the last time I did London. And I went into London with an injury, with a foot injury. And I hadn't done the training, and I set myself a target of 3 hours 15. I did 3 hours 20, but I just wanted to go and do London. So even though I wasn't in the best of shape, I just went and did it. But in between, I'd done lots and lots of sub 3s, and it sort of became, well, it's not easy. They're never easy. They're always a tough event. You've done them, a marathon isn't something that you take lightly. I have the utmost respect for the distance, but the 3 hours became something I'd done. So then the aim then is to, what can I do? And how far can I progress this slight obsession I have with running as fast as I can along these roads? And it became like that. And I almost forgot about 3 hours. That once I'd done it again shortly after that, I never really worried about going under 3 hours because I always knew I could do it. And it was a complete mindset change. And in a way, it sort of liberated me in my training, because that 3 hour barrier had now gone, and it wasn't something in the back of my mind the whole time.
So throughout the book, you describe how you kind of took little breaks from road running, and you do other things. And one of the things that you were doing were mountain marathons.
Yeah, it was a colleague at the running club, Brian Stadden, who he'd done one of these mountain marathons, and he said to me, you need to try it. He said, you like to walk in the Lake District. He said, how would you like to run? So I said, yeah, I wouldn't mind that. He said, it's a mountain marathon. So I said, what, 26 miles over the mountains? He said, no. Now what it is, he said, you go for 2 days. Most of them are 2 days. Some of them are 3. He said, but you run, you and a partner, because for health and safety reasons, you have to have somebody with you in case one of you gets hurt. So he said, you run, you carry all your kit. So you run, you find checkpoints, and you get given a 6-figure grid reference. And on the ground, there is a little orange and white flag. You have to find this white flag in the middle of these mountains, given a description of where it is as well as the 6-figure grid reference. And he said, you do it all day Saturday. So we go up on the Friday, you run all Saturday, then you get all your kit out of your bag, including your little tent and your sleeping bag, which you share with your partner. And then you get up on Sunday morning and you do the same again back to the finish. And I said, well, that sounds interesting. I said, but I have a few problems with blisters. I used to get terrible blisters road running. And he said, you'll be okay. He said, it's okay. It's fine. You'll be okay.
Well,
so
what could possibly go wrong?
And what could possibly go wrong running off-road in shoes that I wasn't used to, because in those days, they didn't have many models of shoes. There was I don't know, you recognize them, Alan, Walsh's with the main, they were designed as a fell shoe. Well, they crippled my feet. At the end of the first day of the first mountain marathon, my feet were bleeding. I had multiple blisters. I had blisters on my blisters. That's how bad my feet were. And they came out with this magical surgical tape, this white tape that sticks to your feet like glue. And they taped all my toes individually, and then taped my feet and my ankles and said, you're going to run the next day. Because I said, I can't run Sunday. I'm out. And my partner said, no, we got to carry on. I said, I can't walk. So they taped my feet, and we went the second day, and we were the 3rd fastest team on the second day. It was just amazing.
Oh, wow.
And this tape, I spent a week in the shower trying to get it off my feet because it was stuck that well. So it was quite an experience. But again, I did the first one and I just fell in love with it.
It's kind of like orienteering.
It is. It's not as fine as orienteering. You know, they have to give you a feature within that 6-figure grid reference to let you know that you're in the right area, because a 6-figure grid reference is like 100 meters square. So they tell you that the reference they give you, it's the bottom right-hand corner of that 100-meter square. But to help you, they'll give you a description of, say, a stream bend or a stream junction, or
an anthill.
A sheepfold or something like that, east wall of sheepfold. So you have to run. The trick with this was, because I just thought, well, we get the checkpoint and then we just run to the next one. And that's where we went wrong on day one, because we were running and suddenly you're in mountain terrain. You don't know how fast you're running. So how long does it take you to cover 4 kilometers running off-road up a mountain? You don't know, because you've never done it before. So sometimes we would think we were there and we were nowhere near it. And sometimes we would overshoot, we would run past because it was decent terrain. So that, again, it's a whole new learning about knowing where you are all the time. So when you're running, there's features between the checkpoint you're at now and the next one you've got to go to. Pick out what are the main features. You know, it might be a crag, it might be a stream, a very wide stream, it might be a sheepfold, but look for them. Look for those features so that you know exactly where you are the whole time you're running. So you spend a lot of the time running, holding a map in front of your face and having your thumb on a point where you believe you are. And it's just a different experience. All pace goes out the window. It's just some of the mountains are so steep, you've got to walk up them. You can't run.
But also, it seems like you don't necessarily follow a path. Like if there's a path, you can follow it, but not necessarily.
No, a path is a bit of a luxury in these events. If you find one, that's we've got a path. Let's run. But a lot of the time, you are going through stuff, the tussocky grass that comes, up to your waist, and you're trying to run in it, and there's potholes in it. There's all sorts of traps. You've seen people have spectacular falls and disappear into peat bogs, and so many different things happen. And some quite serious. A guy in one of the events we did, him and his partner, they went slightly off track coming towards the finish on day 2. And they realized the mistake. So they tried to run across the face of this hill to get back to the main route, came across a stream, tried to cross it. One of them fell. He fell about 20 foot and he was seriously, seriously injured. Now his partner dragged him out of the stream because he was lying in the stream. They say if somebody's had a bad accident, don't move them. He had to move him. Otherwise he'd have died of hypothermia. He had to drag him out of the stream. He then had to run down to the finish, alert them, and they sent a helicopter in and they winched him out. This guy was in hospital for about 3 months with multiple fractures and all sorts. So it can be a dangerous sport as well. And that's the other reason you have a partner, because if he'd have been on his own.
Yeah.
But they are so challenging.
And you don't actually know what the course is before you get there. So you go and then they'll say, okay, we're going to move you by bus to somewhere where the event will occur.
Yeah, they did that all the time. I've been on a bus, been on a train, been on a ferry. They just trick you. They say, and they don't tell you where you're actually going until 36 hours before the event starts. So that you don't even know what area of the Lake District or Scotland you're going to until 36 hours before the event.
So it's not like you can't study. You can't decide, I'm gonna study for this race and study all year.
No.
Plan your route.
You can't do that. You don't know where it's going to be until 36 hours before. Then they tell you, then you drive up there, and you don't get your map until you've started the race. You get a map and you get your control descriptions to mark on the map. Now they've gone a little bit soft, I think, in the last few years, because they've started to mark the grid points on the map. They put little red circles on for you so you know where your features are. Instead of you having to do it, they do it for you. So, but they are fantastic.
Way.
Oh, it's all gone too soft. See, health and safety.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of orienteering in Kielder Forest,
which
you probably know about in the UK.
Yeah.
And it sounded like mountain marathons is sort of orienteering on steroids. It kind of goes over more days and it's tougher and it's longer, and you have to punch you have to get up to all the checkpoints. Otherwise, if you miss them, you get a time penalty, if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
But you've also got to get back in time. If you're too late getting back, you get a penalty.
Yeah. Some of them are, if you do what they call a score, that's how it works. You get time penalty for every minute you're over the allotted time to complete. And in most of them, if you miss a point, you're out. That's it. You're out of the race completely. But that's the score class. Then they have like an A, B, C, and D class, and they're all different distances and different technical abilities. But you have a set time to finish. So if you're not back at the end of the day by a certain time, then you're out. If you miss a checkpoint, you're out, which is devastating. If you miss one on day one, then you're there for the weekend, and a lot of people run. In fact, the cover of my book, there's a photograph of me running with somebody behind me, which is Claire, and that's on a mountain marathon. And the reason that was able to be taken was because the guy we were running with, his partner the day before had suffered severe dehydration. It was one of the very few hot days that you get in the Lake District. and they had to take him to hospital and put him on a drip. So this guy was left without a partner, so therefore he's out of the race. So we said to him, well, just run with us. You're here, you're not competitive, but just come along with us. And so he ran with us, and he was taking photographs the whole day. He was running behind us, taking pictures.
Oh, that's nice. So I guess you can be more than two, but you just can't be by yourself for safety reasons. Yeah, I was going to also ask if there are any like prerequisites. Like, do you have to have a CPR course or something like that before you do one of these?
No, you just have to be. They tell you, you have to be capable. And I'd put in some of the rules of the race in the book, and it says things like, you must have map reading skills. You must be aware of how the weather can change in a mountain environment. And to demonstrate that, one year we were up in northwest Scotland, and this race was run in June. So we're reaching the height of our summer. We had a snowstorm and a complete whiteout. We couldn't see anything. We were up on the top, and me and my partner, we made the decision to get down and get out of it because you could not see anything. And it's dangerous, and you have to make those decisions. You have to make those decisions.
It sounds like an amazing event. The Australians have a sport or an activity called road gaining. I don't know if you've ever seen this.
No,
it looks like somebody in Scotland or the Lake District invented mountain marathons at the same time as Australia invented road gaining, and they're very similar type events. They're sort of 24, 48-hour events where you cover a wide area, or you're out in the wilderness and you have to camp. When I saw your stuff on mountain marathons, I thought, oh, that sounds like road gaining in Australia.
Yeah, it must be.
But of course, the weather's probably different.
Yeah, they'd probably suffer more with heat stroke than...
Yeah, you probably have to do snake bite courses and stuff like that.
How to wrestle a crocodile and things.
Yeah, different kinds of challenges.
There was some great events that went on in this country for quite a few years in these mountain marathons, and there's always memories. We tried everything to go lightweight because you're carrying everything on your back, so you want to be as minimalistic as you possibly can. And we tried solid fuel for fires, which is basically a fire lighter. The trouble is with a fire lighter, once you light it, you can't put it out. So it just burns out. So you have to carry several fire lighters. And I don't know whether you've been in a confined space with a fire lighter, but they smell pretty bad. And the fumes get to you. But we tried that. We tried smaller tents. I remember seeing one guy, and he was the leader in the top elite class of this particular event. And we knew him. His name was Ivor Powell. And he had a brother, Alan. Him and his brother used to win a lot of these events. But we were walking around the camp on Saturday evening. We'd done our first day. Him and his brother were in the lead, and we saw Ivor. And I thought, he doesn't look quite right. He's got a lump on his shoulder. So we went over to him, me and my mate, and we said, "Are you all right, Ivor? What's that with your shoulder?" He said, "Oh, that's my sleeping bed." He said, "That's my mattress." What he used to do, he used to put bits of foam under his kit on pressure points like his shoulder, his hip, and his back. And that was his sleeping mat, to be as minimalistic as possible.
Only put the sleeping mat where you touch the ground.
Yes. And that's what people used to do in these events to save weight.
That is so smart. Now you can probably just buy an ultra lightweight sleeping mat or something, but that was so smart.
He didn't look great. He looked like an American footballer.
We should get some of the mountain marathon elite and see whether they can do the Barkley marathons, probably with Lazarus Lake down in Tennessee.
I've watched the Barkley marathons, and that just looks absolutely brutal. I mean, they send you through all sorts of stuff, don't they? If there's a gorse bush there, I suppose they send you through it, do they? No, they don't go around it.
I think so. It's designed it's basically designed to break your spirit. But I think if people have subsisted in mountain marathons in the Scottish Highlands are basically just a natural thing that's designed to break your spirit. So if you can survive that, you can survive most things, I think.
Yeah, especially if you can survive the midges. That's the big thing.
Like many long distance people, you've had your run in with regular injuries of different types. Bill, maybe we could ask you to talk a bit about your injuries, and are there some things you wish you'd done differently in terms of managing your injuries, because you seem to have a series of things. Is there any advice you could give people to stop them getting injured?
I think runners are the worst. They're great at giving advice, runners, but they're not very good at actually taking note of their own advice. Because I would always say to people, if you've got an injury, have a day off, take some time out. If you've still got it a week later, maybe you need to go and see someone. But in practice, we don't do it ourselves. And I was just like that. I would get an injury and think, well, I can run it off. Or if I have a day off and I go running again and it's still hurting, well, it'll probably go next week. So I'll see how I am next week. And I think we're all guilty of that. But there's the one that really finished my knees, I think, was the one where I'd had varicose vein surgery to remove some bad veins in my leg. And they then said, right, no exercise for 6 weeks, wear these awful stockings that keep all your leg together and you'll be okay. And 6 weeks later, I took the stockings off and went and ran a half marathon race with very little training, because it was part of a series of 3 and I was placed 3rd overall. And I just went and did it. And I say it in the book, it's there in my diary. We go back to the diaries, Liz, about what it can tell you. It's there in my diary. I ran that half marathon. Okay, overall, I finished 4th in the series, which was still a great result. And then a little note at the bottom said, a little bit of pain in my right knee. And that little statement was the start of the trouble I had with that knee. Just that one little statement. I hadn't prepared myself for the race. And what I found out later was all the small muscle groups around my kneecaps had weakened. So I went and put them through a half marathon. And what happens then is your kneecap moves side to side and it starts to wear away underneath. And I continued to train and to race and to run, and still with a little bit of knee pain, which got worse and worse and worse. And when they x-rayed, they showed me the x-ray and you can see where my kneecaps had worn away underneath, where I had not. They said, you need to go away. You need to build up all those small muscle groups around your knee to stabilize that kneecaps. That's the only way you will be able to continue running on a regular basis. And I did that, and touch wood, I managed to get running again, but I've always had, since then, I've had problems with my knees. That was the one injury. The other one was, what did I have? Plantar fasciitis.
Oh, I've had that one.
Liz likes that one. She had that
I can bond with you over that one for sure. That is the worst ever.
When you put your foot on the floor first thing in the morning when you get out of bed, it's like somebody sticking a needle. It's so painful. Then through the day, it eases off, so you think it's okay. And then the next day you get up, ow, that hurts, almost like a stone bruise. So it took me a while to identify that one. And that was just a matter of strong anti-inflammatories, lots of rest for about, I think I had something like 6 weeks off with that in the end, with no running, lots of anti-inflammatories and just taking it easy. And then the other one I had was a Morton's neuroma. I don't know whether you haven't had that one, have you, Liz? No? Not.
Oh, yes, actually I have, but I was lucky. So it seems like your story of plantar fasciitis was very short-lived and your Morton's neuroma was a bit longer. So I had the opposite. My Morton's neuroma was like a week, maybe 2. And then I had a little bit of, I went to see a physio right away because it was one of those things. I would just put my foot down and I just had a shock in the top. I thought I had a stress fracture in my foot. Yeah. I was terrified. So I saw someone for that right away.
Now, well, that's what I didn't do. And that's the mistake I made. And it went further, because what happens then is you don't just get the pain, then you get a tingling, then your foot goes numb. Mm-hmm. And running when you can't feel your foot, especially if you're going off-road, is very awkward. You don't know whether you're putting your foot down right. So that culminated in a cortisone injection, which I had, and they said they don't know whether it will work, but it did. It took a few weeks, but it worked. And strangely enough, it's come back in the last couple of weeks. I've just started to get it again. So I've just phoned my GP yesterday and booked an appointment to see him because I want another cortisone. Because it's lasted me about 6 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I was lucky with that because I went to see a physio right away, because my coach said, well, just go see what it could be before going to the doctor, because getting a scan like is a little lengthy.
Yeah.
So I figured physio was very accessible. I saw him right away, and he knew right away what it was. And he said, okay, you better not run on this because it can be chronic, and you don't want it to be chronic because like then you can almost not really do anything about it. And I was terrified of never being able to run again. So I definitely followed his advice, and I didn't need a lot of time off. But what he said was, when you resume running, you have to make sure that you never go past that point of like when it starts to be irritated again.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd go for runs, and sometimes I just have to like randomly stop and walk home, because like that was the point where I would start to feel it was irritated. But I was so scared that I would never be able to run again, that I definitely followed his advice.
You know, when I first realized I'd got this Morton's neuroma, I read a bit about it, and yeah, some scary stories about that's it, your running's over if it gets really bad.
Unrunner's
Especially
fantastic.
with the internet.
Mm.
Mostly we could very well all sit around here and reminisce about runs that we've done and events that we've done. But in fact, the thing that bonds us the most strongly is injuries.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go, oh yeah, I've got a sore Achilles. Oh, I had that. Oh, I had that for a year. Oh, it was terrible. Yeah, you mustn't do this. You must definitely do this.
Yeah, and it's more impressive if that injury has got a name like plantar fasciitis or Morton's neuroma, because it sounds really, wow. If you had that, yeah, I've had that.
And you go, oh, I think I've pulled a muscle in my calf. Oh, is it in your soleus or your gastro? Oh, in your soleus. Well, if it's a grade 1 tear, you need to do this about it. And like everybody's an expert, and everybody bonds and loves you because you have an injury and they've had it. And
And it's pretty funny because like that's how you figure out where all your like important muscles are, because every runner will know like gastroc and soleus, but because you know most of them have had tightness in one or the other, or an injury in one or the other, but like then you ask them, well, where's your tricep muscle, and they'll be like, oh, I don't know, what's that?
Don't use us for running.
Yeah, do I need that to run now? I even used to get people in work who don't run come up to me and say, Bill, I've got this problem on my foot when I walk. If you got any, because they knew I'd had so many injuries, they said, he must be an expert on leg injuries, so we'll ask him.
So that's good. We can even bond with non-runners about injuries. It's really what brings us together.
So if you have to distill it down, Bill, what are the things that stick in your memory the most about your running career? You know, what's most memorable, or what are you most proud of?
I think obviously the sub 3 is like the hairs on the back of my neck. When I knew I was going to do it before the race had finished, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I just felt so excited. It was just unbelievable, and it was really quite emotional. I was in tears at the end. But I think I'll always remember my first one and the pain of the first one. I'll always remember the sub 3. That you know, people say, oh, well, what about your PB, your 2:35? I said, I remember a bit about it, and there's quite a bit in my diary saying, I was telling myself off. My diary entry for that race actually said, finally got the time I think I'm capable of, but had doubts at 17, 18 miles. I need to sort myself out and get these negative thoughts out of my head. You know, it was almost telling me off for not being more positive. So but once you go into the realms of the ultras and the off-road, Comrades, incredible event. London will always be a love of mine, and if I feel I'm strong enough to do it again, I will. And the mountain marathons, the Josh Naylor Challenge, but stepping forward at the age of 60 and doing that 112 kilometers across the Lake District, I am so proud of that. And that's why it featured so much in the book, because it was a huge undertaking. I didn't have confidence. I hadn't been running well. I still had that bit of an injury. Nothing was right for me to do that race, but I still went along and put myself, as I say in the book, when you put yourself on the start line, you're saying to everybody, here I am, I'm ready to go. And sometimes it's very difficult to do that and to do it with confidence.
And to that extent, do you have anything that's still burning for you, or have you changed your future ambitions?
Well, it's now a case of do I try and do those extremes, or do I settle? As I said to one person, in fact, we were cycling with friends today, and I said to one of the guys, I said, there's somebody I know who's roughly my age. He runs until he breaks because he feels, I'm running, so I'm going to do it. So he pushes himself, and then he breaks, and then he has 9 months off, and then he comes back again, and then he runs again. Whereas my aim is to just run, and for as long as I can. So if I'm still running in 10 years' time, and I'm still here in 10 years' time, that would be fantastic. For me now, it's all about running. But having said that, that Bob Graham still is just, it's there.
It's calling.
It's calling.
It's calling. Well, you never know. It's good to have that in the back of your mind, because that also keeps you honest about what your running process.
So I guess I just wanted to kind of maybe elaborate on that point, because it seems like, you've accomplished all these great things in terms of times in the marathon, but like, even though, now you're saying probably I won't do a sub 3-hour marathon anymore, or, I'm not sure if I'm capable of running 100 kilometers again. But yet you're still very, I guess, very passionate about running, and you still want very much to continue doing it. Yeah. So I don't know if you have like tips for anybody else that maybe, once their faster days are behind them, like something that they can look forward to.
Well, I think the key to it is that once you've finished beating your body up and beasting it and putting it through all the pain, actually go back to when you first started running. And why did you start running? Did you do it for the enjoyment? Was it to get a certain target? But most of us is because we enjoy doing it. So go back to doing that. Go back to making it enjoyable. It doesn't have to be an awful, painful, stressful experience, as some races can be. You can actually go out, as I do now. I go out probably 3 times a week with the dogs, and I love it. I just enjoy running off-road. I just enjoy being able to run, being able, my brother says to me, you still running? I said, yeah, I still run. Oh, I said, I don't know how you managed to do it. I said, I enjoy it. I love it. I love being out in the outdoors. And I don't think I'll ever lose that, ever. So look for the enjoyment. As the speed lessens and the body gets a bit weaker, just take pleasure, stop. I do quite often. There's a few runs I do where you get to a particular point, you have a fantastic views across the city of Bristol and out to the countryside beyond. Just stop, look at it, take it in, enjoy.
Pretty wise words. Even in our pursuit of sub 3, I think what we've said is, particularly in COVID, we need to find joy in the training process and enjoy what we do. In fact, I would say I would have a problem if I couldn't run rather than having a problem while running.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, to not be able to run would, I don't know. Well, I had a spell out when I tore my kneecap away, but that was probably my fault for thinking I was a 20-year-old soccer player again and playing when I was a little bit too old. But and I think you're right, Alan. In your training, you're going something that's a major task, but you can still enjoy the process. Even if it's a case of looking back each week and saying, instead of looking at next week and going, oh my God, I've got to do all this next week, look back at what you've done last week and pat yourself on the back and go, yeah, I've had a good week. I've enjoyed this. I've worked hard. I've got through it all. And here I am at the start of my next week and I'm ready to go again. And that's an achievement, because you've got past that week. When I used to give training plans to people, I used to give them the plan, and I'd say to them, you'll probably come back to me in 3 weeks' time and tell me it's too much and you can't do it. And I said, what I will say to you is, come back to me in 4 or 5 weeks, and if you still say the same, I'll change the plan. But I think you'll find that it won't become easier. You'll get more used to it, and you'll find yourself coping better with it. And that's what you've got to do. Pat yourself on the back every week and say, I've just done a week of hard training and I'm ready to go again.
Those are wise words. So I guess on that note, maybe you can let people know where they can get a copy of your book.
It's available on Amazon at the moment. You can get the Kindle version, or there is a paperback copy available. So it's there.
If people search for Running on Tired
Legs, that's it. That should come popping up on there.
If they look for Bill Graham, not Billy Graham, he's a slightly different guy.
You notice my clever trick there of putting Bill Graham as the author rather than Billy Graham as the author, because I'd have had phone calls from all these disappointed people.
All the evangelists be calling you up,
saying, well, when are you going to go to the church? I don't see that in your book. When I was a teenager growing up in Chester at the time, Billy Graham came to the UK and did a tour, and he was in Chester at the town hall. So they had a huge banner across the front of the town hall, Billy Graham here on such and such a day. And we were walking home from school, and my friend said, look, your name's up there. So they dragged me up to the front door. And that was in the days when they had like a concierge at the front door who wore a uniform and a cap. And they said, he's here. And this guy looked at us and said, what are you doing? He said, Billy Graham, this is him, he's here. Go away, you lot. And he said, before I give you a clip around the ear. Now go on. But he was there in Chester when I lived there.
Yeah, I have to say I tried to Google you, like search for you on the internet, and there are many Bill Grahams.
Well, there was the entrepreneur who was famous American who had who used to put on the rock shows and all that sort of thing. Yeah, there's a few out there. I think I'm one of the smaller ones.
Is there a place, if people wanted to follow you or learn more about you, is there a place where they could do that?
Well, possibly on Facebook is one platform I do post stuff on occasionally. I post all my runs on Strava, so all my running and cycling is visible on there. And most of it is in the Bristol area, and recently it's all been, say, fairly short, but I'm on there as well. I don't have a Twitter account or any of the other Instagrams or anything.
I noticed that your book is self-published, Bill. Do you have any tips for authors who might be thinking of or trying to get their book published?
Well, when I started to I spoke to Ira. Now, Ira has always been a writer. He used to write articles for magazines on different subjects, and he was also a stand-up comedian. He's a man of many talents, Ira. And he said, don't bother trying to get to one of the publishers. When you're happy with it, do it yourself. Go onto Amazon, he said. It is very simple. And he said, cuts out the middleman, you get your book out there. He said, if you're like me, you're not hoping to become a bestseller. All you want is people to read your story. And that's why I wanted to write it, because I do want people to read the story. I want as many people as possible to read it and maybe gain something from it. Gain a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of not making those mistakes that I made.
Well, we read your story, and we pretty enjoyed it. We talk about it on our runs, and we take things from, I think, every book we've read.
Yeah.
And I think more so, we get this opportunity to talk with you, and actually just talking with you also is a lot of fun too. And we'd recommend it to people.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed the talk. And for you too, well, I hope the training goes well. When is the marathon?
Hopefully, it will be the one in Toronto in October. It's usually like the third weekend of October.
Yeah, I should be looking out for it, and I'll be looking for your names in those. But I'm only going to look up to 3 hours. If I don't see your names, then
then it's not worth seeing anyway. But
the best of luck to both of you. I'm sure you'll achieve.
Well, our approach is, if we get joy out of the training process, then we get to the start line. We've had a wonderful time to get to the start line, and then that'll take half the stress off us in terms of delivering, because then we're not dependent upon having a wonderful year. We're not dependent upon the result. However, if we come in at 3 hours and 1 minute, we are going to be really sick.
Very disappointed.
Well, the best of luck to both of you.
So why don't you just give us a quick wrap up, Liz, on just your overall thoughts of the book? I'll give you mine, and then we'll try and get Bill off to UK bedtime.
So I enjoyed the personal stories and learning about another realm of running, which I didn't know about, which was the mountain marathon events. And I like the bits of history, like reading about how as a kid you played in the remains of homes that had been bombed during the war. It's a reminder of how lucky we are if we live in a country that's peaceful. It was encouraging to see how you managed to get back to running multiple times after pretty big injuries or setbacks. I guess it just shows like where there's a will, there's a way. The only thing for me that maybe flew over my head a little bit were sometimes like the areas of the UK, because I don't really know that area very much, but I don't find that it took away from the enjoyment of the book, because I really related to the stories and the experiences that you had.
From my point of view, it was great to read about the Lake District, because it's an area that I love from my own time there, living not that far away, 50 miles, something like that, when I was a young lad. And certainly I hold still an ambition to run there, preferably on one of the 2 or 3 days where it doesn't rain. It was great to discover the wild world of mountain marathons, which I'd never come across before. And I think as anybody who has, some ambitions to run in off-road, it sounds like some fantastic adventures to be had there. And will harden you up for anything that you would care to do in the future, I think. So it was fun to read about that. Just the UK history while you were growing up in the UK, for me, reminded me of my own childhood. In the UK, I was there, I was born in 58, so I lived through the 60s, 70s. I think it was 1986 when I emigrated to Australia. So it's a great retrospective on the UK. And it's a fantastic book for anybody who has a lifelong love for running. So if you just love running, it's clear, it shines out that you are a running-centered person and focused, and go through all of the ups and downs and ambitions and insistence on performance and improvement that we all at our own level choose and try to deliver. It was a great insight into UK running culture and fell running culture for people who don't know anything about fell running in the UK. So thank you very much, Bill, and we wish you great success with your book.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Running Book Reviews podcast. A big thank you to Bill Graham for providing a review copy of his book, and also for coming to speak with us today, way past his bedtime. And if you'd like to leave us feedback on how we can improve the podcast, or want to suggest another book that you would like us to review in a future episode, you can leave us a comment on social media. So we are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and we do have a Twitter. We are reviews_running on Twitter. You can also follow us on social media to find out when we release a new episode, and you can subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform. We also have an email address that you can reach us at. It's runningbookraeviews@gmail.com.
That's all for us from Running Book Reviews.